It's Wildlife Month at McBain. I'm Burk from the Southgate store. We are actually in the heart of Edmonton right now. Doesn't quite look like it. We are very blessed that we have nature where we can do wildlife photography literally on a bus route. We're in the northern part of the White Mud Ravine this morning, hoping that something shows up that we can photograph. It's one of the quirks of wildlife photography is there's never a guarantee. That's just the way it is. Down in this area here, I have seen and photographed owls, hawks. A lot of the songbirds aren't here yet. They shall show up in the next few weeks. In the winter, the chickadees and the nuthatches and the woodpeckers are everywhere, and for all intents and purposes are semi-tame, which makes it a great place for beginners to do wildlife photography because you're not as likely to spook something before you get your shot as you would if you were out in the wilds of Jasper or Banff or something like that. There's also a lot of waterfowl, deer, weasels, rabbits, squirrels, chipmunks, you name it. It's all down in here, literally in the heart of the city. There's a few things to keep in mind when trying your hand at wildlife photography. First and foremost is safety, the combination of your safety and the safety of the wildlife. We don't want to do things that will disrupt wildlife breeding and nesting. We want them to be around for the next photographer to photograph. There's a real danger in wildlife photography that we get so excited when we see something and we're trying to take its picture, we forget about our own safety. So I'm standing on it's probably about a 6-foot drop off here. Someone brings up their camera, is focused on taking a picture, decides they need to take a step back or two in order to get the shot frame they want, and if you're not aware of where you are, you're down here in the creek. You see it a lot in the national parks. People get out of their car to photograph things and then step backwards into the live traffic lane. People have harassed an owl in Calgary to the extent that the owl starved to death because it was using all of its energy to keep away from the people instead of eating. There are also people who bait wildlife, put food out, including live mice, in order to get the owls to come out and to get that perfect shot. The owl starts to associate food with people and then they end up getting hit by a car and in wildlife rehab. That's not ethical photography. Here in the ravine, it's sort of a little bit different because everybody puts out bird seed. The birds are conditioned to it. They're city birds. They're in some ways not wildlife anymore, but a great way to practice wildlife photography. One of the most important things about wildlife photography is if you want your photo to have impact, try to be, or have yourself and the camera at eye level with what you're photographing. If I were to see a duck out there and shoot down on it, I will get a picture of a duck, but you won't stick with looking at it very long. Whereas there happens to be a spot here where I can get down almost to water level and then shoot across the water into the eyes of the duck, which will be much more impactful. So without stepping into the water, this position down here is much better for photographing things on the water. There's actually something interesting there. Today, I'm out here with an Olympus camera body, mirrorless, with the Olympus 100 to 400 super zoom. The longer the telephoto lens you have, the easier it gets to get decent pictures. Keeping that safety thing in mind, it allows you to keep distance between yourself and the wildlife and to stay in safe positions to shoot from while still trying to fill as much of the viewfinder as possible with the subject. The Olympus, being mirrorless, has in-body stabilization. When I use my Nikon with a 500mm lens, I do tend to use handy-dandy monopod on my pack there or a tripod. For birds in flight, the monopod is a little bit better because you can rotate around the axis of the monopod, whereas with a tripod you'd end up tripping over the spread legs. If you have a location where you know something will be, because there's a food source or a nest, tripod is super handy because you can set everything up, lock it into place, focus on the nest or the burrow entrance or the dead carcass that something is going to come and feed on, have everything perfectly focused, and then either with a remote control or a cable release or with your hand on the camera, you can take the shots when they happen. What we had down here is a common goldeneye couple. The male was preening. So for people who are new to birds and wildlife, one of the interesting things is the good-looking ones happen to be the guys. So one of the things with wildlife photography is patience. If you move into a new spot like we have just here, you're likely to spook anything that was here as you approached. If you have the time and the patience, sit down, relax. On average, takes about 20 minutes to half an hour for the wildlife to forget that you just moved into their turf and resume their normal activities. The key then is not to get excited. Take your time, slowly, without a whole lot of muss and fuss. Get ready and then start taking your shots. You'll have much more success than if you go stomping through the bush and try to chase after it. You end up getting really good shots of rear ends. Butts! So it's much better to either move very slowly or pick a spot where the lighting is good, everything is good, and a duck has just come into our field of vision here, and wait for things to come to you. So what I've done here is I've put my camera on a monopod with a gimbal head. It's not essential equipment, but it's super handy. Getting a picture of a bird sitting on a branch is wonderful, especially if you've never photographed that particular kind of bird before. But at some point you want that bird to be doing something, whether it's preening itself, eating food, taking off, or landing. You have to have the camera up and ready, and then you have to wait. So the beauty of the monopod is it holds the weight, and the gimbal head allows range of motion. If I loosen the tripod collar, then I can also very easily go from horizontal to vertical shots. It's all very smooth, very simple, one-handed operation, and I can stay like this for hours waiting for that interesting shot.